It all started like any normal afternoon. Sun shining, my son walking home from school, backpack slung over his shoulder, ready to relax after a long day. But what happened next still has me shaken. Just as he reached our front porch, a woman we'd never seen before, someone who clearly didn't belong on our block, suddenly stepped in front of him. Out of nowhere, she demanded to know what he was doing there, why he was trying to get into that house, and where his parents were. My son, confused and nervous, calmly told her it was his home. That's when things escalated fast. I happened to be just down the street, returning from the store when I spotted the confrontation. At first, I didn't even believe what I was seeing. A grown woman standing between a child and his front door like some self-appointed gatekeeper, questioning his right to exist in his own space. My son was visibly upset, trying to explain himself, and all I could feel in that moment was a wave of anger and disbelief. I rushed over and asked the woman what exactly she thought she was doing. Her response? She clutched her phone, told me I was being aggressive, and within seconds she was dialing 911. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't someone looking out for a neighbor. This was something deeper. She didn't see a child walking home. She saw something else, something shaped by her own biases. And when faced with the truth, instead of backing down, she tried to flip the narrative and play the victim. As the sirens started echoing in the distance, I stood there, heart racing, son clinging to my side, and this woman still acting like she had done nothing wrong. I knew then this wasn't just about my son or that one afternoon. This was about the everyday reality we live with, and how fast a situation can turn dangerous simply because of who we are. But what happened next? That's where things got even more unbelievable. As the sound of sirens got louder, I could see neighbors starting to peek through their windows. Some came out onto their porches, watching quietly. The woman, let's call her Karen, kept glancing around like she was waiting for backup. She stood firm, arms crossed, phone still in her hand, talking to the 911 operator and describing me as a threatening man and a suspicious individual trying to break into a house. The irony was unreal. I literally had the house keys in my pocket. My son held onto my arm tighter, and I could feel how shaken he was. He's only 10, too young to have to experience something like this. And yet here we were, standing on our own property, being treated like strangers or worse, criminals. I didn't want to escalate anything, but I also wasn't about to let her rewrite the story. I asked her again, calmly, why she thought it was okay to block a child from entering his own home. Her response? I've never seen him before. He doesn't look like he belongs here. That's when I realized this wasn't about concern. This was profiling, plain and simple. I tried to reason with her. I explained we've lived in that house for almost 8 years, that my son walks this same route every weekday, that our neighbors know us. But nothing I said seemed to matter to her. She just kept repeating, I'm doing my civic duty. You should thank me. Meanwhile, I noticed one of my longtime neighbors, Mr. Roberts, watching from his porch. He and I have shared backyard tools, swapped barbecue recipes, helped each other shovel snow in the winter. I gave him a look, silently asking for backup, but he stayed where he was, frozen. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he didn't want to get involved. That part stung too. Then, just as I turned to reassure my son, we saw the first police cruiser turn the corner, lights flashing. The tension in the air thickened instantly. I could see Karen's face light up, like she felt validated, like this was all going exactly how she planned, but I had no idea what was about to happen next. As the police cruiser rolled to a stop in front of our house, everything seemed to move in slow motion. My heart pounded. My son's grip tightened. Karen stood a few steps away, waving her arms like she had just saved the neighborhood. The officer stepped out, adjusting his belt, eyes scanning the scene. His partner stayed in the car, watching through the windshield. Karen rushed over to him first, talking fast, pointing at us like we were intruders caught in the act. I stayed where I was, hands visible, speaking gently to my son, trying to keep him calm even though I was anything but. The officer finally turned to me and said, "Sir, we received a call about suspicious activity. Can I ask what's going on here?" I nodded slowly and replied, "That's my son. That's our house. We were trying to go inside when she stopped him on the porch and called you." I gestured toward the door and pulled out my house keys. The officer hesitated, looked back at Karen, then at my son, then back at me. Karen jumped back in, claiming she saw my son snooping around and acting nervous. I was stunned. The boy was literally pulling out the key from his backpack when she blocked him. I tried to explain that, but every time I opened my mouth, she'd cut in with another version of events. She was spinning a whole narrative, and the crazy part, she was confident in it. She really believed her version would stick. Then something unexpected happened. Another neighbor came walking over, Mrs. Alvarez, who lives across the street. She'd seen everything from her window. She said quietly to the officer, "That's their house. The boy lives there. That woman doesn't belong here." Karen's face twitched, and for a second, she looked genuinely surprised someone spoke up against her. But even with Mrs. Alvarez backing us, the situation didn't deflate. The officers didn't walk away. Instead, one of them started asking more questions: how long we'd lived here, if I had any ID, if my name matched the lease. It felt like I had to prove something that should have never been in question. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about one woman. It was about a system that let her feel empowered to do this in the first place. And even with the truth right in front of them, I didn't know how this was going to end. The questions kept coming, slow, deliberate, and with a weight that made everything feel heavier than it already was. One of the officers asked me to step aside, away from my son. I didn't like that, but I didn't want to cause more trouble. I looked down at my boy and told him it was okay, even though my voice cracked a little when I said it. He nodded, trying to be brave, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The officer took my ID and walked back to the cruiser to verify some things. I stood there on the sidewalk, feeling exposed in my own neighborhood. Karen was still talking to the other officer, quieter now, but clearly trying to make sure her version of events stuck. I could tell she was getting nervous, though. The cracks were starting to show. Maybe she hadn't expected anyone to speak up for us. Maybe she thought she could twist this into a full story before anyone questioned her. But now she was shifting, saying she just wanted to make sure everything was okay, that maybe she overreacted, but she was only trying to protect the community. It was infuriating. She had gone from bold and accusing to cautious and performative, and yet, somehow, the weight of her first call still lingered over us like a shadow. That initial lie, that my son was suspicious, had already triggered a chain reaction that wasn't going to be easy to reverse. More neighbors began gathering, whispering, watching. Some looked concerned, some just curious. I caught Mr. Roberts again, still on his porch. This time, he finally came down the steps. He didn't say much, just nodded at me, then looked at the officer and said, "That's his house. Been his house for years." It shouldn't have taken all this for someone to speak. Still, nothing changed. The officers didn't let us inside. My son was cold now, rubbing his arms. I could feel the seconds stretching, each one pulling tighter at the nerves in my chest. I didn't know if we were about to be told we could go in, or if this was going to take another turn. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything could shift. The silence that followed was the loudest part yet. Just when I thought the situation might be winding down, another police cruiser pulled up. This one wasn't part of the original call. It was a supervisor, apparently called in as a precaution. The tension snapped right back to full force. Now there were 3 officers, all of them standing in front of our house, as if something dangerous had actually happened. My son leaned closer to me, his little voice barely a whisper. "Dad, are they going to take us away?" That question hit me like a brick. Before I could answer, the officer who had taken my ID returned, his tone more serious. "Sir," he said, "your license lists this address, but we still need to confirm that you actually reside here. Do you have a utility bill, a lease agreement, anything inside that proves it. I blinked, stunned. Inside, I repeated, pointing at the front door. You want me to prove I live in the house you won't let me enter? It was a perfect trap. And that's when the second twist hit. Karen, suddenly trying to save face, turned and said, "Wait, I think I've seen them before. Maybe I made a mistake." Her voice was softer now, almost innocent. But the damage was done, and the officers didn't back off. They were still treating me like a suspect. Her change of heart wasn't about right or wrong. It was about protecting herself now that witnesses were watching. But what really pushed it over the edge was what came next. One of the officers stepped toward me and said, "We need to enter the house to verify your claim. Can you unlock the door and let us in?" Now I was stuck. If I refused, I'd seem suspicious. If I agreed, I'd be opening my home, my private space, under pressure, like a suspect proving innocence I never should have had to prove. And in front of my son, no less. I looked at the key in my hand, the officers, Karen still watching from the sidewalk, and the crowd of neighbors now fully gathered. The whole street had turned into a scene. And just as I reached for the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. A security alert, motion detected, from asterisk inside asterisk the house. I stared at my phone screen, frozen. The alert from the home security app showed clear footage from our living room. Someone was moving inside. It wasn't me. It wasn't my son. And it definitely wasn't supposed to be anyone else. I tapped the video feed. There it was. Blurry, but real. A figure walking past the hallway camera. My heart skipped. At the same time, the officers were demanding proof I lived there. Someone asterisk was already inside asterisk. I quickly raised my phone and showed the closest officer. "There's someone in my house right now. Look." That changed the mood instantly. He leaned in, studied the footage, then called over his radio. The energy shifted. Karen's smug expression dropped, replaced with confusion, and maybe a little fear. This wasn't the story she'd expected. The supervisor motioned for the other officers to circle the house. My son was pulled gently behind a patrol car for safety, and I was told to stay back. For a few moments, everything was chaos. Voices on radios, footsteps running across our lawn, and my neighbors standing in complete silence. Then, a loud knock came from the back of the house, followed by shouting, "Police! Come out now!" Seconds later, an officer emerged with someone in handcuffs, a man I didn't recognize, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. He looked rough, surprised, caught completely off guard. Apparently, he'd broken in through the back while everything was unfolding out front. The irony hit hard. While I was being treated like a criminal on my own porch, an actual intruder had slipped in through the back door. Karen's fake concern, her call to 911, all of it had created such a big scene that it had actually covered asterisk for someone committing a real crime. The officers apologized. Well, kind of. They cleared me and my son, returned my ID, said they'd review the incident internally. Karen disappeared quietly, without so much as a sorry. But the final twist came later that night, when I checked the security logs again. The intruder? He hadn't just walked in that day. He'd been casing the house for a while, caught on older footage, lurking in the background. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only thing Karen was actually right about, for all the wrong reasons. Later that night, after everything had finally calmed down, I sat with my son in the living room, our living room, just trying to process it all. The house felt different. Not because anything was broken or stolen, but because of what the day had revealed. We were safe, yes. The intruder was caught. But what lingered was the fact that in trying to protect our home, I had to first convince others that we even belonged in it. Karen never came back. No apology, no explanation, just gone. But her actions stuck with me. Not just because of what she did, but because of how easily her voice was believed over mine. A simple call, a few well-placed words, and suddenly I was being questioned on my own front steps, while the real danger walked in through the back. Mrs. Alvarez came by the next morning. She brought muffins and a quiet apology, not for what she did, but for not speaking up sooner. Mr. Roberts nodded at me across the street the next day, a little longer than usual. It was subtle, but it meant something. People saw what happened, and maybe it'll make them think twice next time. We upgraded the security system, not just for protection, but for peace of mind. And my son, he's okay, though he still asks why that woman didn't believe him. I told him the truth. Sometimes people see what they want to see, but it's our job to make sure they see what's real. If there's one thing I hope people take from this, it's simple. Don't be so quick to judge. Don't assume. And if you see something that doesn't sit right, ask questions, but with kindness, not fear. Because home should feel safe, and no one should have to fight to prove they belong in their own.